Hello and welcome to the Game Podcast from The Times. Trent Alexander-Arnold is booed by Liverpool fans, Ruben Amorim threatens to quit Manchester United, and the red mist descends on Chelsea's Nicholas Jackson and the Nottingham Forest owner Evangelos Marinakis. It was a heated weekend of Premier League action as the temperature spiked at Anfield and Old Trafford and in the race for Europe. There were huge wins for Newcastle United and Aston Villa, and what could be very costly slip-ups by Forest, Chelsea and Manchester City. And with 2 games left to play, there promises to be more twists and turns ahead. I'm Gregor Robertson, and with me to discuss all of that and more are the senior sports writer Alison Rudd, the sports data journalist of the year Hamza Khalik Lunat, and the football reporter covering Chelsea and more, Pete Rutzler. Guys, good to have you. I was struggling to think about where to start today, but almost my ego and me sitting in the host chair here almost said, right, we're going to start with Forest because this is the game I was at, and there was mad scenes there. But I think, Alison, after our discussion last week and your very mature answer about Liverpool supporters' reaction or what was going to look like to Trent Alexander-Arnold after his confirmation that he's leaving for Real Madrid, it didn't turn out that way, did it?
No, I would say I believe if 20% of fans boo, it sounds like 80% are booing. So I don't think we know for sure what proportion of those people at Anfield were booing him. It's just that, but I'm not denying they were booing him, but I don't know that it was quite as rounded and as fulsome as it actually sounded. And that's the only nice thing I'm going to say about the fans, because, so what? I have a personal rule. It's my personal rule. I would like to think a lot of people have the same rule, which is you never boo your own player. Never boo your own player. It's just about borderline acceptable to boo your own player before kick-off to make a point about something. But while they're playing for your team, you do not boo them. And that was the biggest shock of the afternoon. I was not shocked that when his name was read out before kick-off as being on the subs bench that it got a boo. You could even interpret that as being just overwhelming disappointment he's not going to be there. We feel sad about this. Boo, it's boo that he's going, not booing him as an individual. And then he comes onto the pitch from the bench and it starts to feel a little almost orchestrated because the fans sing a rousing song about Conor Bradley, who will be taking over a more full-time role in that position. They sing a song about Steve Gerrard, which I think is misplaced because although Steven Gerrard stayed at Liverpool, he did admit to be tempted. And the same sort of process would have gone on with Trent Alexander-Arnold. He would have been tempted and then thought about it and then, oh, surprise, surprise, Real Madrid is sexier than Chelsea. That's basically what swung it. Steven Gerrard didn't go to Chelsea because he felt he couldn't be in the same division as the club that he loved, whereas going abroad is much more acceptable if you're going to leave Liverpool. But even if Trent had decided to join Manchester City, which would have probably made me puke into a bucket, I would not have booed him while he was actually playing. There is a line, and I think whether it because it was a beautiful day and more lagers had been drunk, or the sense of party that has been around Liverpool since sealing the title, and once you've done that, there's nothing else to talk about. Liverpool aren't in any other cup finals, so they drink a lot and talk about the big issue, which is Trent going, and it all becomes hyper emotional as opposed to in any form rational. But Paul Joyce, who has to work in Liverpool and come face to face with fans all the time, he felt so strongly about it that he said he felt that the club had been let down, and
Liverpool lost a little piece of their mystique by booing Trent, was the headline.
Exactly. And it's really hard to argue with that. Also, I would say, booing your own player in these circumstances is akin to bullying. It feels very wrong. It feels like someone's being picked on for doing something that is not illegal, it's not immoral, and it's not as if he hasn't given everything to the club and won everything you can win with the club. And why on earth can't those minority, I hope, of fans who were jeering acknowledge that if they were in the same position in their they can't picture what it's like to be a Premier League footballer, but I'm sure a lot of them have jobs where you have to make decisions about moving your family or getting promotion, and maybe if you get promotion you have to work slightly longer hours. These things happen. You have to work out what's best for you, your family, your career, your emotional well-being, your sense of fulfilment, and that's all that Trent has done. He's worked out that he would regret not experiencing life in Spain.
Hamza, it's an interesting discussion, this, because 2 interviews after the game were also very interesting. Arne Slot said that one of the privileges of living in Europe is that essentially we have free speech. People can say what they want. And then Andy Robertson gave a quite beautiful interview, actually, about how much he'll, first of all, miss Trent as a friend and like a colleague that made him a better player and things like that. But also that he doesn't feel he should tell anyone else how to feel or how to react to this. It's quite an emotional kind of, obviously an emotive subject. So what do you make of, do you think that's a fair point? Other people have made that no one should be telling Liverpool fans how to feel about Trent turning their back on them.
Well, of course, everyone is allowed to feel however they want. It's always an entirely personal thing, and for some fans to feel that way is fine with them. But it's hard not to sympathise with Trent, for example, when he is given 20 or so years to a club, to a place, built up that relationship, and then he steps onto the pitch, and you would actually say most Manchester United players, most Everton players actually have had a better reception at Anfield, because most of them don't get booed, a few might, than Alexander-Arnold did, which would sting deeply. I mean, Michael Owen spoke about this on, it was either PLP or BN, and he mentioned that even now, all these years later, he still remembers how he's booed. And you think that Trent, it's already difficult for a footballer, for a Liverpool footballer, to walk through Liverpool, right? You're going to get mobbed. But for the next 50, 60 or so years, he's going to have to, if he returns to Liverpool, he's going to know that some people might approach him and go, you shouldn't have left, or say some very choice words to someone that's given the vast majority of their life so far to a football club. It reminds me of, in The Simpsons, there's a scene, do you remember it, right?
Not yet, go on.
I can't remember the 2 characters, but a guy works for 20 years and he says, and he's essentially being dismissed, and he says, so this is it, 20 years of hard work and a handshake and good luck? And the guy opposite says, I don't recall saying good luck. And you really feel, honestly, I really feel for Trent here, because you've got a fantastic footballer, and what Liverpool have actually done, they've had this first proper celebration of a title in however many years, and they've sort of ruined it for themselves. This should have been a match where beat Arsenal, another sort of celebration. They have 3 big celebrations before they win the league. The day that they actually won it against Spurs, then this one, and then the Palace match. So that you get 3 big celebratory occasions. And they sort of ruined this one. And they've waited so long for it. And that's just because they've sort of spited themselves. And what makes me sad is that they've had this quite unique talent for the last 9 years who's been a real joy to watch. Every week, when I've watched them at least, I've been really... you see stuff that you don't see from other players. And it makes you happy to see that. And you think the only reason they're really upset is not just because he's one of their own, that feeds into it, but it's because he's actually good. There's other players that have moved, not Scousers, but like Ramirez, Yossi Benayoun, didn't really care too much when they played for other clubs. Torres, yeah, but that's because he was good. Trent, yeah, but he's not even going, like Alisson said, Real Madrid's not really a rival, quote-unquote rival, right? A European rival, but that doesn't matter. You are still allowed to leave. You can, and it's not like he's done it in a bad way, right? As in, he's just sort of tried to go about his business and do it. But yeah, they're upset the club aren't getting money or he's leaving at his peak. But like has been discussed before, you have that right to move your family and set up somewhere else and think about it. And the other thing is, if he wasn't good, how would the club have treated him? If in 10 years' time, let's say 10 years' time, because he's 26, right? If he's 36, what would the club say? Oh, we're going to give you another 4-year deal because we love you and the fans love you. Of course they wouldn't. It's a business. And so that is not reciprocated. And if he was 16 and he wasn't as good, the club would have just said, thanks for coming to the academy, but we're not going to take you on. And that just becomes the end of the relationship there. But because he's good, the fans were upset. And I think Paul was right. I think it is really unbecoming of a club that usually prides himself on this sort of stuff, and is usually so good at this sort of stuff that the fans acted like that. It's very disappointing, and and the way the other players reacted, Szoboszlai in particular, but also Robertson in his interview, is very careful to not criticise the fans. But you can imagine what they're thinking. And poor Trent, he probably went home, like I said, 20 years at this club, and he's probably sort of gone home to bed, just sort of sobbed a bit, because these are your people, right? And they've treated you like a pariah for stuff that, in my view, I think most people's view, isn't really pariah level stuff.
Well, he's done everything he's signed up for, right? Literally, in terms of his contract, he's done everything. He's won everything. It's not the first, is it, with Liverpool? So if you mentioned Michael Owen, Steve McManaman's another, but didn't win everything that Trent has achieved. It is quite difficult to understand that reaction. I was trying to place it, because I followed a bit of PSG when Kylian Mbappe was leaving, and that was a very toxic departure over an extended period. Every couple of years it came
Still
up.
is.
Well, it still is, right? And it's going to be brought up, and it's a different thing in terms of his legacy. He didn't win everything. But even when he left, there wasn't like the boos that we heard on Sunday. There were boos leading up to it when different moments of news popped out about him going and whatever. But when he actually went, there was still an appreciation that he was their all-time top goal scorer, all of these kind of things. So it was very, very striking for me that Alexander-Arnold, who was homegrown, it's the dream player, right, would not receive some kind of, I don't know, appreciation for wanting a new challenge in
Well,
his
the
life.
irony there is, I mean, if you think about it, if you strip it back, what message does this send to players who might be from Liverpool, go to an excellent Liverpool academy, and their dream is to play for the club? You're actually being told, if you do that, don't ever think you can leave. It's supposed to be celebrated that you have someone you can identify with from the stands. That's supposed to be fantastic. But then equally, just as like parents have kids and then they set them on their way to university or an apprenticeship or go around the world travelling, you might do that with feeling a little sad, but you do that thinking, well, I've done my job here. I've set them up to have a fulfilled life and experiences because I was pretty good parent. And that's how they should be thinking of it. They should be celebrating the fact, A, that Liverpool have an excellent academy, B, it's still producing players that can make a break into the first team. Some of them do so with startlingly good effect, like Trent, and then he wins everything, and then he wants to see the world. That is a beautiful thing, and it makes those Liverpool fans, not all of them, but those Liverpool fans who are booing, it makes them look incredibly narrow-minded and not able to see the bigger picture at all. And given that there's no room, and if Liverpool had just missed out on the title and there was a sense of, life's bad, we haven't won anything, and he's doing this to us as well, it might be like 1% more understandable. But this should be a beautiful moment to fly the nest. It really should.
I almost think that maybe the fact that Liverpool are top of the tree just now, like there was maybe slightly, although there was not that much understanding for McManaman and Owen, but Liverpool weren't, Premier League champions. They weren't a team who really were threatening every season to go all the way in the Champions League. So leaving for Real Madrid was a step up. It was like, you can argue whether it still is or not, but it undoubtedly was. I think possibly some part of what feeds into it now is that Liverpool are top of the tree. Why would you want to leave? What's bigger than us?
And
I think that's fair.
And the finance side as well, right? Like that's the idea that he's leaving for nothing, and therefore, which I don't actually agree with. I'll come to that. But the idea that if he had a year or two on his contract, Liverpool would take a big return for him, a player of his calibre. So you think maybe, I'm trying to think of other examples, like Harry Kane going for 100 million for Spurs, so there was that aspect. Jude Bellingham, I think, signed a contract with Birmingham.
He was called a mug, basically, for signing that contract as well, so there's no winning, is there?
Yeah. No winning, I suppose. And you wonder maybe, say with like Kane, if he hadn't signed that contract, how would that affect how he'd be remembered at Spurs? Would that change anything? But I think Paul Joyce wrote about this in his analysis at the time when Trent came out and confirmed that he was going. Liverpool haven't had to buy a right back for an extended period of time, so there has been a saving there that and they've won trophies. So there has been a return. So And I do wonder if that's maybe, I mean, it is a bit reflective of the culture, right? That everything is boom and bust, everything is amplified as amazing and awful very, very quickly. The fact that we can go from Liverpool winning a 20th title and suddenly that's taken as a primary issue, right? I mean, within what, a couple weeks or so? Week or two?
To be honest, that was the theme of the weekend. We're going to talk about that more. There was more Nottingham Forest qualifier for Europe for the first time in 3 decades.
He's desperate
and there
to
were
get
boos.
Nottingham Forest
There were
into the
boos at the final
conversation.
whistle. Spurs and Manchester United made it to the Europa League final a few days ago, and there were boos at the final whistle. It's like, we're in a strange world at the moment. Just quickly, we've not even mentioned the score in this game yet after 10 minutes. 2-2 with Arsenal. Also, the kind of banner, it was a bit of a chastening one for Mikel Arteta with the banner before kickoff.
You see, I don't even think that's very becoming, to be honest.
agree,
I
Just let me describe
love
it.
the
It was
wit. I love the. Oh, go on.
Okay, go on.
Describe the banner first.
Banner of Arteta holding a lovely bouquet of flowers and a kind of a nice dress, saying "Always the bridesmaid, never the bride."
Right. It's funny, and I don't mind that being a meme that people pass between themselves on their phone. It's not very becoming to have it as a poster at Anfield. In fact, I refuse to believe it was. I thought it was, AI generated, and it wasn't real. Because I said to my son, I do not imagine someone who is a Liverpool fan has put that much effort into dissing an opposition manager.
Well, he had obviously said after the PSG game, they're the best, one of the best.
And
teams
that's
in Europe.
hilarious. I can see that.
And
that's really, really
was
funny.
chorus throughout the game.
Yeah, it's
you're
funny.
having a
That's
laugh.
fine. But to actually, when the banners on the Kop are a thing of joy and beauty and wit and homage, to have one of Mikel Arteta holding a bouquet of flowers I think that's naff.
Has there been much spite between Liverpool and Arsenal?
No, this is not really.
As well, that's why, and obviously the game didn't have the jeopardy, so it did feel kind of unnecessary.
I find that whole element of fan culture, I understand it is part of fan culture, right? To define yourself against others and be very tribalistic, and that's how you end up with this situation with Trent, right? But I've never quite understood it really. I remember being at the Youth Cup final a few years ago. Arsenal played West Ham at the Emirates. Kids are playing, under 18s, right? West Ham are beating Arsenal. The team's got Miles Lewis-Skelly, good team, but they're losing. It happens. They're getting beaten quite comfortably. And the fans there, the Arsenal fans, started walking out. And first of all, you're thinking, why are you walking out on the kids? Just stay into the end, show them your support. And as they're walking out, they start singing about Tottenham. What do we think of Tottenham? Blah, blah, blah. Stand up if you hate Tottenham. And you think, you've got your kids here. Can't you just celebrate and support them rather than talk about people who aren't here? And this happens for every club, right? And I find it so bizarre, so weird, and so small-minded to think about other people that aren't there at the same time when your team is playing. Just support your team. And that banner is an example of that, and the sort of the way that people don't really think about what's in front of them, enjoying what's in front of them. Like, just to return to Trent quickly, we were meant to have 3 more matches of him where we could watch him as football fans in England seeing him pass to Salah. One of the most dangerous passes in the league, right? It always, if you take the expected pass value, right, it is one of the most dangerous passes in the league. He comes on, he makes all these chances yesterday as well, right? He's so fantastic to watch, and you just ruin that. You might not see him against Brighton, you might not see him against Palace again. That's ruined that moment. And this, I find it really bizarre. But then, just on Arsenal as well, because I think they do deserve some analysis. The first period was very poor. They looked miles off the pace. In the second half, they were better. Liverpool also then looked miles off the pace. But I found it bizarre that Mikel Arteta was talking about the 6th red card of the season. And like Alison mentioned last week about them being the best team in Europe, season on season, I've seen regression. 2 years ago, I looked at Arsenal and went, this is a fantastic team. They know how to attack, they know how to play, they know how to defend. Last season, we saw a regression, a small one, still a very, very good team, but one that wasn't attacking as fluently, that looked a bit inhibited. And then this season, I know some people think Declan Rice had a good season, but I think relative to last season, he hasn't. So he still had a good season, but last season was outstanding. This season was just good. The vast majority of players in that team have regressed as well. Saliba looks worse. Gabriel, I've always been of the opinion that Saliba's better, but this season has changed my mind. Gabriel's been fantastic. Saliba's been okay. Raya's good, but Lewis Skelly's been fantastic. But otherwise, I see regression in almost every area of the pitch. The standout player is Saka, obviously. He's very good. He was injured. You put that aside. But to see Arsenal play the way that they have recently, as in, there are reasons that have been put forward. Red cards, injuries, all sorts of things, right? But that can explain a small drop-off to Liverpool and season on season in terms of output, attacking output, defensive output, points. It does not explain 15 points for a team, compared to a team that's now been on the beach for 3 weeks. They should not be this far behind with those. I mean, look at the points tally. They'll end up as sort of average fourth-place team if they win the last 2 matches. That's not acceptable for Arsenal. And I think some real introspection needs... and then you got the striker discussion. Rubbish. Because, as we've seen in the past few seasons, as we saw last week, Barca scored 6 goals in 2 legs without a striker. And we've seen in the past few seasons, Liverpool didn't have a striker, they won the league. Manchester City didn't have a striker, they won the league like 4 times. You don't need a striker, you just need to play attacking football. And all these things I've packaged up very quickly, but Arsenal, I'm really underwhelmed by them this season, and I don't find the excuses convincing. I think the regression is weird. But it was nice to see them playing well for that 20-minute period at the start of the second half. That's the first time in a while that I'm going, oh yeah, that's the Arsenal that I sort of recognise. But it's been a long time since I've seen that.
Yeah, definitely a lot of pressure heaped on Mikel Arteta next season to end their silverware drought. It'll be interesting to see what happens between now and the end of the season in terms of reaction to the reaction to Trent Alexander-Arnold. Who knows? There might be. That's the kind of way fans work often. Anyway, let's get to the City ground. I've been desperate to get there because, again, what a mental end to the game. Very strange way, as I said, to celebrate qualifying for Europe for the first time in 3 decades. And when Evangelos Marinakis strode onto the pitch after the final whistle to speak to Nuno. I don't think it was originally to speak to Nuno Espirito Santo. Perhaps he was in for the ref, perhaps, well, who knows. But he did speak to Nuno in quite heated terms, and it was a bad look, wasn't it, Hamza? He defended his actions in a post-match statement, saying that it was to do with the frustration about an injury to Taiwo Awoniyi and the medical staff's misjudgment in allowing him to continue the game. Taiwo was injured in a kind of sweeping break in the last few minutes, clattered into the post. He said he was okay to continue. Then Forrest made another sub, brought on Jota in the 91st minute, and then Awoniyi turned out wasn't okay, so they were hobbling around for the last few minutes. But the biggest frustration was undoubtedly that Forrest conceded an 81st minute equaliser when they were just about to take back control in the race for the Champions League. So, what did you make of this? I mean, there was a big reaction on TV. Gary Neville called it scandalous. The club were very keen afterwards. I was there to kind of say this was not a direct criticism of Nuno, even if it looked that way. It was just a frustration to do with this one incident involving the injury. What
do you think that's how it played out? Marinakis went over to Nuno and said, this is not me having a go, right? It's just this very specific thing about Taiwo Awoniyi and how he came off. I would have actually spoken to you like afterwards in the dressing room, but I didn't want to disrupt that because you've got media duties. So I decided to come on the pitch.
I have to say,
I don't find that convincing.
Nuno played a blinder.
He did.
He played an absolute blinder because he was asked that. Clearly, we asked him that directly. Like, would you not prefer greatly if he said this to you behind closed doors afterwards? And he just kept coming back to the point that his passion, his sort of drive, and want to make Forest a big club is what has taken Forest to this point. So he really defended him. I'm not sure whether that would be the way he would speak about it behind closed doors, but he defended the owner to the hilt. But what did you make of that as a look?
But why is it outrageous for an owner to come onto the pitch? You see, this has evolved in English football that we do not want to see anyone who's putting money into a club anywhere near the pitch, as though they are in some way toxic, automatically undermining the manager, the coaching staff and the players to show that they are angry or upset or indeed happy and want to celebrate. They are supposed to be invisible or in the corporate box. Or I don't see why it's automatically a really bad thing to do to be a passionate owner. I don't think it is.
in a normal work environment, if the owner came in after you've done objectively an outstanding job, and something that wasn't the target has now become the target, a target that was previously just unimaginable, and now the owner is coming in after you've done a really good job, and starts having a go at you in front of everyone, in a normal work environment, that's really unprofessional. I'd feel under pressure and I wouldn't like it. I'd probably tell them to go away.
But we don't know what they were saying,
just think
do
that
we?
in football there's always been like a sort of a line, like the owner shouldn't really come into the changing room without permission. They shouldn't. I don't think you should go on the pitch because it's a very public arena, and particularly if you're going to have a heated discussion with the coach or with anyone. In fact, it doesn't matter who you're having a discussion with. Don't have it on the pitch. So there's a kind of, I think there's always been in football a feeling that there are lines that
in English
that
football.
can cross.
In Greece, it's a bit different, of course, and that's where Marinakis comes
Exactly.
from. But I think the vast majority of the footballing world looks to Greece, looks to Turkey, and go, no, that's too far, and for good reason, I think.
We should point out there have been kind of issues with referees with Marinakis and Forest. He had a 5-game stadium ban earlier this season for spitting on the floor close to a referee. I think
he needs to
in the tunnel.
As the defence said, he often needs to clear his mouth, and it just so happens to be adjacent to the person.
Yeah, I also think that this kind of, although this has been a miraculous season for Forest, whether they fall short in the Champions League or not, this kind of served a reminder of the guy at the helm. Like, yes, his passion and his drive and everything, his money, has taken Forest to this point, but all of everything in the past kind of is quickly forgotten, and who what kind of character, a tempestuous individual they have at the helm, means it's not going to be plain sailing. I don't think ever. So, I mean, so back to the game. I mean, Forest had it. They went behind. Their record at coming from behind is the third worst in the league. So there was huge nerves in the stadium. Morgan Gibbs-White equalises and then produces a moment of sublime technique to cross for Chris Wood to take the lead in the 56th minute, I think it was. And at that point, you thought it could be 4-5. And it's been, I think it's one win in 6 now. Defeats to Brentford, Everton in the last minute at home. They really have kind of felt the pressure, Alison, haven't they, in this sort of run since the start of April, when they were third, I think, 10 points clear of 6th. They've kind of thrown it away. Frustration is understandable up to a point.
And if you're a manager with your coaching staff and you are plotting the season and how you approach the games and the minutes you're going to give to players and resources and so on, it's all, and the 10s and 20s of backroom technical staff you have to plot these things out. What Forest did not factor in was the emotional, and the emotional impact of being within touching distance of something that seemed utterly ludicrous at the start of the season. Because I thought they were playing very composed, unemotional football, and that's why that they would get a top 5 place. Because, but instead of maintaining that, it has got to them. It really does seem to have got to them that this awesome achievement against all the odds, which they didn't plan for. I mean, they would have initially planned to avoid relegation, and then slowly move up the table. It's just been. It's also, I mean, there are times when you watch Forest now, and I'm not even seeing the same team I was 2 months ago, and
Nuno said that himself.
It's
actually.
really, really strange that's happened, and it can, because everything else is the same. It can only be the pressure of being so close to an amazing achievement, and maybe, as you alluded to there, Gregor, having seen the owner on the pitch, maybe that speaks to a level of pressure they didn't think they would come under, rather than the owner saying, "Well, this is jolly lovely." He's been like, "I want more." And that's maybe added just that that straw of extra pressure on the back of them, that they just crumbling slightly. I mean, I still think they would be deserving of Champions League football for the whole narrative of the season. And I like watching them play. They are, on the break, they are one of the most counter-attackingly beautiful teams there are. But how did Nuno explain that he doesn't see the same team? What does he not see that was there?
He's finding it hard to explain, actually, but he's been very honest about it. I've covered quite a few of their games recently, and he sort of said, we need to get back to being us.
Yeah.
That's what he's repeatedly said. And he said after this game that there were periods of the game where we looked more like us today, but like the series of games where they've been so stretched and like wildly open at the end, like giving balls away, falling over, like calamitous stuff, and they could have lost. Leicester had two breaks, and there was one of the 15-year-old who came on, almost scored. Like, and Vardy had a good chance as well. Their
style is so built around scoring first, isn't it? And then keeping things tight. And I think Alisson's absolutely right. Once the pressure comes in and that collective, which is what they are, which is what I think why you can really get behind them as well. That it's based on a really strong collective. Once that starts to fray a little bit, once the pressure comes into it, a couple of injuries as well. Obviously, Chris Wood's been out, not been scoring. Obviously, big that he did score against Leicester, I think. Olaraina's been out, and I think Hudson-Odoi's been out, yeah, and Morata was playing at centre-back. Like, something that was so consistent, really strong connections. Once that comes undone, a little bit of doubt there, pressure on another level as well. That's what happens when the owner walks onto the pitch. That only adds to that environment. Then it just comes unstuck a little bit, and it's a shame, really. But I think there is a style point to it as well, because it's so difficult for them. And I think when they fall behind, coming back from those, having to be more expansive, having to sort of open up a little bit, like you were saying, and they're conceding chances and games are going the other way. They're not quite finding the right side of that balance, which is, I think, sort of built into Nuno's football.
But wasn't this a great advert for the Premier League, that a team that have been relegated so dislike their East Midlands rivals that it felt like a blooming cup final, didn't it? They were so up for beating, or even just denting their chances. Some
great chants in this. It was really strange that for a large period of the first half, Forest fans were singing about Steve Cooper and also that he hates Leicester. And then Leicester were singing champions of England, you'll never sing that. Yeah. And Forest were like, champions of Europe, you'll never sing that. And then they were like, you weren't born. So it was like a real tit for tat. It was great. Really, that was quite entertaining. The reason that Forest had this window of opportunity was because of Newcastle's 2-0 win, against Chelsea earlier in the afternoon. Beat Chelsea also. This was an opportunity missed, and Nicholas Jackson did not make it easy for them.
Yeah, I mean the red card, and we'll talk about that, was daft, I think, and I think it was symptomatic of the way the first half hour went in this game. I think building into this game, and I wrote about it on Friday, it felt like Maresca had just sort of settled on a team at a good point in the season, won a few games in a row, first time he'd named an unchanged lineup in 3 consecutive games. That Chelsea have done that since 2018. Yes, Caicedo's at right back, but he found a formula to get Lavia in the team, and Fernandes playing well, getting advanced, Cole Palmer getting on the ball, Cole Palmer scoring against Liverpool and playing really well, more importantly. And you think, right, this is set up really well for a game against Newcastle, who I think their resurgence has been based on their midfield three. Obviously, they were without Joe Linton, but Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, it's one of the best in the league. And you think, right, this is going to be a really good battle. They're aware of the intensity. Cole Palmer on Thursday said, if we're not up for it, St James's Park can eat you alive. And it did. That first half an hour, they were just off it in terms of duels. Just on the basic intensity, Newcastle just overwhelmed them. Romeo Lavia, loads of praise about him. I think he makes a big difference when he's in the team. Had a really poor first half an hour. Just not switched on.
Really, really poor first 2 minutes, though.
Well, even
losing the ball and then not tracking back.
Exactly that. And it was... What was so interesting is Eddie Howe came into this game and changed his setup, went to a back 5. And Chelsea just couldn't deal with it. They couldn't adapt. They didn't they're always playing short passes. They're always trying to build up. They were struggling, but there was no alternative. There was no use of Neto or Madueke using their pace, Jackson in behind. There was none of that. There was no adaptation. And it reminded me of when Chelsea played Leicester at home. And there was a really toxic atmosphere in Stamford Bridge because they were getting frustrated with how the game was going. And Maresca said afterwards, Ruud van Nistelrooy's played a back 5 for the first time. They've never done this before. we just weren't prepared for that. And you just think, back fives are not, I mean, they have been around, you can prepare for these things. But this was the second time we've seen that from Chelsea. And you think, well, how have you not prepared for this? How are the players not equipped to deal with it? There's the manager aspect on that. Then there's also on the pitch again, which is a repeated topic, is players not adapting to the circumstances. The environment's incredible atmosphere at St James's Park, huge game. No one's sort of adapting to what's going on. And then Nicholas Jackson gets himself sent off. And then it becomes very, very difficult. But they actually responded really well to that, which I think says a lot about the intensity.
There is an interesting discussion to be had about positional football and different ways you can approach it. So essentially positional football, if let's say you're playing with a 3-2-5 normal structure, right, that's perfect to break down a back four. But when you come up against back fives, it becomes a lot more difficult. And that's actually, there is a discussion ongoing about the whether you play strict positional football or you give players freedom and sort of move to where the ball is, right? And against back fives, actually, a less positional game tends to be more useful, where you give players freedom and you let them cluster around certain areas. Let's say Cole Palmer pulls to the left and then, Reece James wasn't playing, but let's just say he had an attacking fullback, he would move over rightwards and the midfielder as well, and then you create 4v2 on the right side and you just sort of blast through. You can't quite do that with positional football because of the way that you prioritise space and all that sort of stuff, right? So I understand the thing that Maresca is grappling with there. It can be a bit more complex. In fact, I'll write about it because let me just make a note.
Hamza is now literally he's got his fountain pen and his notepad, and I mentioned the fountain pen because he told me his fountain pen did not leak. His hands are covered with ink, and I am wearing a white top, and I am waiting for a little splash of ink to ruin it forever.
It doesn't matter. No one cares. You always have to put up with when people see my fountain pen, right? People come up to me and goes, "Oh, where's your quill, mate?" And I'm thinking, you clowns, the quill is a predecessor to the fountain pen. Why would I have that? I get it all the time. It's such a crap joke. But to return to Chelsea, you know what's weird about them as well? Actually, you know what's
Chelsea or Pens?
Chelsea. They've only got 2 more wins than Brentford. Likewise, Arsenal as well. That sounds weird. Well, first of all, congratulations to Brentford on an incredible season. And I feel bad just mentioning it towards the end of the first half of the pod because they are fantastic. Thomas Frank is fantastic. Doesn't quite do justice when you look at the value of their squad, their wages, all that sort of stuff. Right, that they are phenomenal.
Hamza, we get lots of love for Thomas Frank and Brentford on this podcast, and there will be more because we will look at the Europa League as well.
And Chelsea, they're so good. All right, we'll do a proper.
Yeah, let's just finish on Chelsea, will you?
Right, yeah. They only have 2 more wins than Brentford. It's not acceptable.
Well, they still have 5th place on goal difference only, and we'll come back after the break to discuss how that leaves the race for the Champions League, looking with 2 games left to play. Before that, quiz time. Who am I talking about when I say a former footballer who played as a defender for Chelsea over 2 spells, as well as Blackburn Rovers and Southampton? Find out after the break. Welcome back to the Game Podcast from The Times. I'm Gregor Robertson, alongside Pete Rutzler, Hamza Khalik Lunat and Alison Rudd. Before the break, I asked a quiz question, and the answer, Pete, is...
Graham Lasso.
You took a while to get there.
I'll get
that would be Chelsea.
Whenever I'm not on the pod, I never get them. But...
Yeah, legend Graham Lasso. Okay, before we get back to the race for Europe, Alison, let's talk about where you were at the weekend. Because, all this recrimination and sort of angst and frustration at the football, and you were sipping champagne and scoffing scallops at Fulham's posh new stand. Tell us about it.
Right, well, it's not just about... I mean, that's it. I have eaten scallops before and quaffed champagne before.
No, we know that.
This was on a different level entirely. I can't even stress enough that this was stratospherically posh. So it was the grand opening of the Fulham Pier complex, it's near where I live. I've spent the last 6 years watching them build what looks like a luxury yacht on the Thames. But
it's actually
supposed to be a football stand, the Riverside stand at Fulham at Craven Cottage. They've kept the cottage intact and they've built this brand new stand. And I did go into it while it's under construction, and you tell it was going to be rather nice. I didn't realise quite how opulent it would be. So you go in and it's done as decking. So it's like you are on a luxury cruise liner. There are decks involving sometimes walking outside along a deck overlooking the water. Everywhere you sit in the posh seats of the hospitality, you can only see water. It's like being on a ship, and they've decked it out like the most luxury yacht you'll ever see. I said, I honestly felt like they were going to go doo doo, and we were gonna head off with Hercule Poirot on my right, Greta Garbo on my left, in some sort of 1930s Hollywood movie, and slowly chug away to see the pyramids, whilst also pulling along a football pitch in the form of Craven Cottage football pitch, because you can't see the pitch from any of the hospitality. And the idea is they want this to be used 7 days a week, not just on match day. So the chefs are there all through the week, breakfast, lunch, dinner. They don't just turn up on a match day and try and pretend to cook. They are there to be full-time Michelin star chefs or whatever. And if you are somebody who wants to experience that on a Tuesday lunchtime, there's nothing to remind you that you are in a football stadium. There is no branding at all. It's like you can imagine you're nothing to do with football at all, just opulence, opulence, opulence. But if you go on a match day, you get the opulence, and then you have to sort of stagger under the weight of venison. I had loads of venison thinking it was roast beef, and then I felt a bit...
How good were the scallops?
Amazing.
Have you been to Trinity? They do nice scallop mousse there.
No, it wasn't a mousse. It was a
This
plump,
guy.
fresh scallop.
Right.
And you could have as many as you wanted. And then you totter 20 feet to your seat, and suddenly there's a football pitch there. It does mess with your head. And it's relatively steep. I mean, it's not that vertiginous, but if you drunk too much, it would feel vertiginous. And then a lot of people... The downside to this is then people stagger back in for half-time, where you're given the poshest pies you'll ever see, and more margaritas and Guinness and champagne, and people just didn't come back out because they were just having so much fun.
Prawn sandwich brigade.
They're really good
Well,
scallops at the Dorchester as well. Honestly, cut at 45. But the point I'm making here is that stuff is entertainment. That shouldn't, for me at least, that shouldn't be at football. That is... It's good that it's a
Why
separate
shouldn't it be
complex.
at football?
It's not, because it's not football. Where's the ball? Where's the 22 players kicking it around?
Well, you only
Like you
there's
said,
only football to watch for those 90 minutes. The rest of the time, you may as well, if you can afford it.
There's something quite beautiful
Have a
about
lovely
a
time.
stadium that is a stadium for football that's there to...
Well, the stadium
view-
is still the best stadium in the world. I've got several books about football stadiums of the world, and in those books, the only double-page spread is devoted to Craven Cottage because it's the most beautiful stadium in the world, and it looks just as beautiful, if not much more beautiful.
You like that side more than the old Archibald Leach side?
No, not architecturally, but there is no room. There's no room in the cottage for. I could just wander up and down decks and be given champagne
Which
on
is
every
nice
deck.
to do at
Here
the
in
Tate.
imaginary horror.
Not a football ground. They're ridiculous.
Okay, listen, whatever. It sounded like a great gig.
It was
That's
a
what I
great
will say.
gig. It was a
It
great
looks
gig.
fantastic. A lot
Was
of
a
wood
lovely
panelling,
gig.
rich mahogany.
Oh, everything was very impeccable.
That sounds like a better gig than Southampton 0, City 0.
I had a nice time.
Yeah.
It was all right.
Southampton fans enjoyed it too
Yeah, they
because
did.
they're now officially not the worst team in Premier League history.
I mean, they enjoyed the last 20 minutes. I mean, a bit stressful, but I think the first half was a bit ominous for them, particularly the way they set up. But yeah, at full time, I think that's probably the loudest roar of the season at St Mary's. It's been a really awful season for them. And they were served up something they haven't seen very often, which was a team sitting incredibly deep, applying no pressure on the ball, no attempt to build up from the back. The most parking of the bus you will see. And it worked.
Imagine they tried that sooner.
Well, exactly, yeah.
They still would have got spanked out of the league. Come on. The score's not that good. Sorry, carry on, please.
No, and I mean, it wasn't like this was a non-event game. Obviously, Southampton already relegated, but it mattered. I mean, it certainly mattered to the home team to get that 1 point. that takes them clear of Derby County in 2008. Southampton, their social media certainly enjoyed it, didn't they? They were calling out Derby County and all sorts. Ruben Diaz less so. Came out and said that this, they didn't come to play. It's not good for anyone.
The Scotland fans know he's got history with this as well. Very salty individual sometimes. Anyway.
But actually, really, City kind of really only had themselves to blame here. Yes, Southampton didn't really come to play, but Pep Guardiola decided to field a team without players who are good in 1v1 situations. Didn't field Jeremy Doku. Didn't field Savinho. Didn't field Nico O'Reilly. Yes, he threw in Erling Haaland, but this was a game that you needed to stretch Southampton, and they didn't. It took them 15 minutes for a shot, and that was blocked on the edge of the box. It took them half an hour for a second shot, and that was a free kick. So that tells you all you need to know about how creative City were. They improved when Marmoush came on, when Doku came on at half time, and Aaron Ramsdale made some really good saves. But this is a blow for City. I mean, everyone just sort of assumed that they would just stroll into the Champions League places and be fine after their terrible campaign. But it's wide open.
Yeah, let's go to Bournemouth, Hamza, for Villa's win and kind of round off the Champions League teams and results, and then we'll look at the table and see where this leaves it all. So what? Your match report kind of centred on two kind of gilded touches, one by Ollie Watkins and one by Martinez at the end.
Yeah, it was Villa were good, and that's interesting because they largely haven't been that good on the road this season. They've sort of struggled. It's weird because many teams have been very good on away from home this season. The win rate for away teams is higher than ever. Blah blah blah. Apart from the COVID season, which is weird because there's no fans. So it's weird that Villa haven't been able to do this, but they managed to stifle Bournemouth quite well. They made it quite a broken match and stopped it being as end-to-end as they would have liked, and that just meant that they needed a moment of quality, and Ollie Watkins provided that with that tiny touch just to put the ball into the far corner at the end of the first half, and then just as I was about to send my match report, they had a red card and then they sat in, and I was thinking, please don't make me rewrite this again, and Emi Martinez made that save and I went, thank you very much. Because a brilliant save. Right at the end, Semenyo shot, he gets a little fingertip, and then Matty Cash follows up and clears the ball off Jebinson's header. Really nice, keeps them in the hunt. They now have European football guaranteed, which in contrast to Forest, Emery was very happy about, quite openly said. I think he was interviewed by maybe BBC afterwards and said, what do you think? He's like, Europe. He was, as you'd expect, right? A fantastic achievement and a great pressure. He's delivered, but
they
no
all
champagne.
Want the big prize.
Yeah, no champagne just yet. He's focused on the next.
You can have some of mine if you want.
Right, let's see how this leaves it. I mean, Arsenal, I think, still need a point, do they? But we'll see Arsenal are in. Newcastle on 66 points, City in fourth on 65 points, Chelsea in fifth on 63 points, tied with Villa, but better goal difference. Forest placed behind on 62 points. Where do we think
Villa
this
have
leaves
63.
it? Yes, tied with Chelsea.
Okay.
Where do you think this leaves it? Who do you think's
Are
in
you
the...
asking for prediction?
I'm asking for prediction. I don't have to do it because I'm in this... Forest Chelsea on the final day could be decisive.
Yeah, that's definitely
it could be huge.
Yeah,
but Villa,
at least for one of them.
But Villa could kind of usurp them both.
Yeah, I'm considering the fixtures.
Have you seen who Villa's got?
Oh, exactly. They've got the
Spurs.
No one needs to say who they've got. You just have to hear me going, ha ha ha.
We do, Alison. We'll see it. They have
6
they
points
have
in the bag
Spurs
for
and
them.
Manchester United.
So that it's a.
So yes, you would think that Villa might get maximum points from that, and that would really put the pressure on Chelsea.
Yeah, and that would take them to 69. That's why I think Arsenal, Newcastle's a big game. Newcastle in good form. Newcastle win that game. I think that's Newcastle done, I think. Arsenal go to Southampton, and I've seen Southampton, stop Man City.
They're part of the bus now.
So, it'll certainly with Chelsea, it'll go down to the last day with Forest, but Chelsea have got Manchester United next, so that should lift them up, which makes it very, very tight towards the end of the season. City, Bournemouth and Fulham.
Oh yeah, I'm at that one. Yeah, I should know that. You don't know. Who knows? The good thing is it's interesting, right? So there's no point us saying, "Oh, yeah, City going to win that one," because that's bollocks. But it should be interesting and good enough to keep everyone don't bet on it, is what I would say.
Okay, well, your kind of little giggle referenced.
Sorry. But it is
Manchester
funny.
United
Come on, it
and
is
Spurs.
funny.
Let's talk about Amorim and Ange. And I mean, Amorim's quotes again. He's a quotes machine, as Tom Clark always says. Basically saying that he'll walk away if there's not a big improvement at the start of next season, quickly next season. United are 16th, Spurs are 17th. They're on 39 points and 38 points respectively. As Paul Hurst pointed out, Blackpool went down with 39 points in 2011. This is an absolutely woeful campaign. And yet one of them is going to be winners of the Europa League and in the Champions League next season. And Amorim again said, I think he said the Champions League is the moon to us just now. The Champions League and competing in the Premier League is like the moon to us now. It's like we are basically, like, we could be embarrassed in these competitions if we don't improve enormously in the summer. So it kind of, he once again hammered home how awful a position Manchester United are in, despite a few days earlier, again, both of these teams making it to a European final.
Yeah, and there's a virus called being in the Europa League, and that's the virus, and it makes your league form embarrassing, record-breakingly embarrassing. And also, it's like almost as if both Spurs and Man United have bought into the fact that the only way they're going to win the Europa League is by being out hitting the other one, but in the league. So it's as if they want to be the most ridiculous team going into the final, and that means they'll win it. So you get Spurs making history for their appalling number of defeats this season. Oh, and I'll trump that, thinks Amorim. I'll trump that by saying we're an embarrassment, and I could leave if we don't. I could leave the club by November if we don't turn things around. And then it's back to Postecoglou to say something equally negative about how awful Spurs are, just to make sure that both teams go into the Europa League final in the most appalling league form possible, so they can somehow have this ridiculous. It's as if it's like being in one of those Enid Blyton topsy-turvy worlds where everything is not where it should be. And it's an embarrassment to the Europa League as a competition that the two teams who are in the final, yes, they're big clubs and they're famous clubs and everyone knows who they are, but just how appalling and increasingly appalling their league form is for them to then get this luxury prize of Champions League football is a bit of a joke to the concept of what you win in these various tiers of European competition. It's just, it's a joke, but it's become such a joke that they've bought into it. It's as if suddenly one of them picked up in the league, they think, oh, we're not going to win the final now.
And Ange Postecoglou's still spiky when he's asked about this. He kind of saying it's not Pythagoras' theorem, mate. When asked, like,
Pythagoras' theorem is pretty simple, man. A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
That's a very Hamza.
Pretty simple
answer. But I mean, how can he be surprised when he's been asked about a record-breakingly bad season for Spurs and ask for the reasons behind it and ask if it should be better? I mean, Tom Allnutt's report was brilliant. It was kind of as a team ever been booed after making a Europa League final? Like, has there ever been such a big contrast between your domestic form and your form in Europe? And I think Martin Samuel wrote in his column this morning that West Ham finishing 14th when they won the Conference League was like the worst kind of domestic campaign of a European champion. These guys are going to beat them.
Yeah, as in, so I generally have a lot of sympathy with managers. I think what they can work with is usually the squad. If you don't have a good squad, you probably aren't going to finish too well. So, and listeners to the pod will know that earlier this season I was very sympathetic to Ange Postecoglou because of the injuries, and I've said similar stuff about Arteta. But earlier on this pod, I also said for Arsenal to have dropped off so much is not acceptable. And the same is absolutely true now, because what we have now is a big body of work where we go, actually, you can see the rough periods and then the bits where you've had a full squad available and there haven't been mitigating circumstances for United and Spurs. And this is completely unacceptable now. And you think with Postecoglou that it is completely wrong to think that 90 minutes in the Europa League final is a good way to assess the season and his credentials for leading the club into the following season, because what we've seen this season is very, very poor. And now that discussion is something that the board will have to have. Daniel Levy will have input, but as in you do wonder when you look at the quality of performances in the matches, you think, is this a suitable basis for next season? And you're thinking no. And likewise with Amorim as well. So I have a great deal of sympathy to a manager that comes in mid-season. I always think you should give them the remainder of the season. He has had injuries. The squad isn't that good. However, and you expect a degree of regression when you change tactical systems and new manager comes in. But this degree of regression is extraordinary. A bad season from where they were under Ten Hag would have been around 10th. And even then you go, that's quite bad for Manchester United. For them to be this bad, for their attacking numbers to drop off, the defensive numbers to drop off, what we see with our, not just looking at expected figures, but what we actually see with our eyes, this is a bad team. They play bad football. And we now have, around 30-ish matches under Amorim, so around 3,000-ish minutes, bit less, obviously. That's a really big body of work to look at and go, all right, is this regression justified? And is this all worth the pain for next season? Are you seeing the things now that you can go, actually, yeah, that's going to be the thread or the basis of better performances next season? I don't think so. And maybe in the first few weeks or the first month, you'll see little things. Now we are, like I said, we've got around 30 matches and we're still only seeing very little things. You should have far more improvement than they have at the moment. And again, I'm not sure. Well, I don't think it would be right at all to look at the Europa League and go, that is what we're going to judge whether we should keep a manager on because of 90 minutes there.
Ange Postecoglou has actually just handed in his notice by saying it's not Pythagoras, it's because we're in the Europa League, which is so basically saying if we get in the Champions League, I can't cope. That's what he's saying, isn't he?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter whether he wins a trophy
he
or
would
not.
obviously hope to have a squad that was less ravaged by injuries and possibly with some additions. So.
Yeah, but
it is not a good excuse
It's
if you're
not.
the club
It's
of
not.
size of Spurs to
It's
say
not.
the
You've
reason
got-
you are having a record-breakingly bad,
I agree.
really bad league performance is because you've had the Europa League to do
20
it.
league defeats. 20 league defeats. It's just.
And
It's
so, like
astonishing.
I mentioned Arsenal, right? So they've had a lot of injury. They're still second, right? And I'm saying that's not quite acceptable for them, and they're second. That excuse can't be rolled out for teams like Manchester United and Spurs being as low as they are. They can drop off a bit. Like I said, their squad's not as good as Arsenal's. But to be this far off the pace is completely unacceptable.
Just Peter, someone who covers Chelsea as well, and them being in the Conference League final, it's pretty remarkable that these three teams are in the finals of major European competitions with such a kind of negative atmosphere surrounding them, and almost a feeling that winning them wouldn't mean anything.
No, well,
That's not true of Spurs, clearly, and it wouldn't be true of Manchester United, but in the broader picture and broader context, it doesn't mean anything for the future.
it's a bit ominous for Uefa, I think, to be honest.
Indeed, yeah.
I don't think Chelsea should be in a competition like that. I don't think a team that's been in the Champions League the last couple of seasons should be in the Conference League because it's not the point of it. I understand the point about, these big clubs can bring value to it, but the whole thing is designed for smaller teams to go deeper in Europe rather than just get beaten and thrown out the competition. Chelsea have made it a point that, we're going to complete the set, the only team to win the 3 European Cups, and that's fine. I get that. But it's also the equivalent for me of, a championship team winning the Johnson's Paint Trophy or just jumping down saying, we completed the set because we've won. It's not called Johnson's Paint anymore, it's the Football League Trophy. But, I still think there should be a Champions League place for the Europa League. I feel like that's a more prestigious competition, even though Spurs and United have stunk the place out. Chelsea's slightly different. They've been able to use their squad. It's actually been kind of useful in some ways, particularly for Maresca.
Yeah, things started to turn for them when they didn't have that option to kind of give their B team some minutes.
Yeah.
After Christmas, sort of thing.
But even within that, the second leg against Legia Warsaw, they got to a European semi-final and booed off the pitch. It's the same sort of thing. It's just undervalues the competition, I think. But
We can safely say it's been a weird season, and it's probably going to get weirder.
Just very quickly on what Pete said, undervaluing the competition. I think the problem is the English league is too strong for Europe.
Yeah.
It's distortive now, and I mean, in a different world, you might have a governing body that would say, actually, this league is too strong. We need to spread out the competition so the top 5 leagues are more equal, or the teams that used to be European Cup contenders in the 60s, 70s and 80s can compete again. But that's probably not a discussion that anyone's going to really think about having, and no one in England is ever going to want to have that, because that means that the strength of the team here will be diminished relatively to the other ones. But it is a problem.
There is an issue with the Premier League itself. Like I've said this before, and we've mentioned it before the podcast as well, that United and Spurs should be in relegation trouble. They should be under that pressure, but they are not. And they're going to get Champions League money, one of them. Like, I think that's incredibly unhealthy.
It's also distorted the Premier League a little bit this season, because teams are able to kind of say, this competition doesn't matter to us now because we're not under pressure. And then games against teams who are playing for something are slightly altered. So, yeah, it has been a strange season. Anyway, I think that's about all we've got time for, guys. We'll be back on Thursday to look forward to the FA Cup final. Thank you very much, Hamza, Alison, Pete. We'll be back then. See you then.